On a sold-out flight from New York to London, a routine trip turns into a masterclass in humiliation. A wealthy, arrogant passenger decides to target a quiet black man, mocking him relentlessly as a fake traveler who doesn't belong in a premium seat. The flight crew tries to intervene, but the situation spirals, threatening to erupt into chaos at 37,000 feet. But what no one on that plane knew was that the man being ridiculed wasn't just another passenger. He was the silent, powerful force who had just bought the airline. This isn't just a story about a conflict on a plane. It's a story about power prejudice, and the day a bully's world came crashing down when he picked the wrong man to mess with. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was thick with the usual cocktail of anxiety and anticipation. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, hurried announcements, and the low murmur of 1,000 different life stories converging at a single point. Transatlantic Airways Flight 101 to London. Heathrow was in the final stages of boarding, and the gate area was a controlled chaos. Richard Rick Sterling, a man who wore his expensive suit like armor, tapped his foot impatiently. His face, usually set in a default expression of smug satisfaction, was pinched with irritation. He was a vice president of acquisitions for a private equity firm, a Diamond Medallion member for 7 consecutive years, and he considered the airport his personal fiefdom. Delays were not just an inconvenience, they were a personal insult. He glanced at his Rolex. 7:15 p.m. They were already 20 minutes behind schedule. He huffed, adjusting the knot of his silk tie. His gaze swept across the crowded waiting area and landed on a man standing quietly by the window, looking out at the tarmac. The man was black, dressed in a simple, dark grey cashmere sweater, comfortable-looking trousers, and clean, understated leather sneakers. He held no briefcase, just a worn, leather-bound book. Rick's lip curled slightly. He saw a man who in his mind didn't fit the profile of the business or even premium economy cabin he was about to enter. Probably on some budget ticket, got lucky with a last-minute upgrade, Rick thought a familiar sense of superiority warming him. Finally, the announcement for premium cabin boarding crackled to life. Rick was first in line, his platinum card held out like a scepter. He strode down the jet bridge, turning left into the serene, spacious cabin of the Airbus A350. He located his seat 22A, a premium economy window seat he'd chosen for its extra legroom and proximity to the front galley. As he meticulously arranged his carry-on in the overhead bin, he noticed the same man from the window approaching. The man, with a gentle smile to the flight attendant, made his way to seat 22B, right next to Rick. Rick froze for a second, his hands still on his bag. He felt an irrational spike of annoyance. This was his space, his comfort zone. He immediately began rearranging his bag, pushing it aggressively to one side of the bin to make a point about territory. The man, unfazed, simply placed his small canvas duffel bag in the remaining space and sat down. He pulled out his book, opened it, and seemed to instantly retreat into his own world. "You might want to be careful with that," Rick said, his voice sharp. "My bag has sensitive electronics in it." The man looked up from his book. His eyes were calm and discerning. "Don't worry," he said, his voice a smooth, low baritone. "My bag is quite soft. It won't harm a thing." Rick wasn't satisfied. He saw the man's simple attire, his single, unimpressive bag, and the lack of a laptop case or a designer watch. The pieces didn't add up to a premium passenger in his mind. "First time in premium economy?" Rick asked the question, dripping with condescension. The man paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "It's been a while since I've flown this route," he replied evasively, turning a page in his book. This non-answer only fueled Rick's prejudice. He was convinced this man was a fluke, someone who didn't belong. Rick settled into his seat deliberately, taking up more than his share of the shared armrest, and opened his own laptop with a flourish. He was determined to make the next 7 hours as uncomfortable as possible for the intruder in his space. The plane doors closed, the engines began to whine, and as they pushed back from the gate, a silent, one-sided war had already begun in row 22. The man in seat 22B, Samuel Pierce, simply continued to read the calm eye of a storm he didn't yet know was about to break over his head. The ascent was smooth, and the Airbus A350 leveled off at its cruising altitude, a silver dart cutting through the inky blackness of the Atlantic night. The cabin lights dimmed, and the soft glow of entertainment screens painted the passengers' faces in shifting hues of blue and white. For Rick Sterling, the quietude was a canvas on which to paint his masterpiece of passive aggression. Every interaction was an opportunity. When the flight attendant, a seasoned professional named Sarah Jenkins, came to take drink orders, Rick ordered a Glenlivet 18, loudly specifying, "Single malt, 2 ice cubes not crushed." He then gestured a dismissive thumb toward Samuel, "And I'm sure he'll just have a water, or maybe a soda." Sarah's professional smile tightened. "Sir, I'll ask the gentleman what he'd like." She turned to Samuel, her voice a little warmer. "Sir, can I get you anything to drink? I'll have the same as him, please," Samuel said, not looking up from his book. "The Glenlivet 18. Neat." Rick's eye twitched. A neat single malt was a connoisseur's choice. It was a small detail, but it chipped away at the neat, prejudiced box he'd put Samuel in. He decided to double down. "Celebrating something," Rick sneered, leaning into Samuel's space. "Win the lottery to get this seat." Samuel finally closed his book, placing a thin leather bookmark to hold his page. He turned his body slightly to face Rick, his expression unyieldingly placid. "You could say I'm celebrating a new venture," he said. "And you, I'm flying to London to close a 9-figure merger." Rick boasted, puffing out his chest. "I do this route twice a month. It's practically my commute. I know this airline, this plane, this crew, inside and out. I know the people who belong here, and the people who are just passing through." The implication hung heavy and toxic in the air between them. A younger flight attendant, Ben Carter, overheard the last comment as he delivered the drinks. He shot a worried glance at Sarah, who gave a nearly imperceptible shake of her head, a silent command to not engage. Samuel took a slow sip of his scotch, savoring it for a moment before replying. "An airline must be a fascinating business," he mused almost to himself. "A complex machine of logistics engineering, and most importantly human interaction, getting it all to work in perfect harmony. That must be the real challenge." Rick laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Who cares about harmony? It's about status perks and getting from A to B with the least amount of friction. It's about knowing who you are and what you're entitled to. People who don't understand that are just tourists, fake travelers." He stared directly at Samuel, who simply held his gaze. The mask of politeness was gone. It was a direct, ugly confrontation. The meal service began, and the tension only escalated. Rick complained that his salmon was slightly overcooked. He sent it back, demanding the chicken, then complained that it took too long to arrive. He spoke to the crew with a tone of imperious command, constantly using his diamond medallion status as a cudgel. Throughout it all, Samuel ate his salmon without complaint, occasionally making quiet, polite conversation with Ben Carter about the book he was reading, a dense biography of aerospace engineer Kelly Johnson. Ben, who had an interest in aviation history, was intrigued and impressed. The breaking point came midway through the flight. Samuel, needing to use the restroom, stood up. As he moved into the aisle, the plane hit a brief, minor patch of turbulence. He instinctively put a hand on the top of Rick's seat to steady himself. Rick exploded. "Get your hands off my seat," he shouted, his voice venomous. "You have no right to touch my things. Who do you think you are? You probably snuck into this cabin anyway. I'm going to have the crew check your ticket. I bet it's a fake." The outburst was loud enough to turn heads. Passengers in the surrounding rows stirred, their sleep-addled curiosity piqued. Sarah Jenkins was there in an instant. "Sir, is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," Rick said, pointing a trembling finger at Samuel. "This man is harassing me. He doesn't belong here. I pay thousands of dollars a month to this airline for a premium experience, not to be bothered by people like him." The phrase "people like him" hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. The cabin, which had been humming with the quiet drone of the engines, fell silent. Samuel stood calmly in the aisle, his hands loosely at his sides. He looked at Rick, then at Sarah, his face a mask of disappointment. "There's no problem, miss," he said quietly. "The gentleman is just having a difficult flight." But Rick was too far gone. "Don't you dare patronize me," he spat. "I want him moved, now, or I swear I will make it my personal mission to have every single one of you fired. Do you have any idea who I am?" Sarah Jenkins looked from Rick's contorted, furious face to Samuel's unnervingly calm one. She was caught. The rulebook had procedures for unruly passengers, but Rick was one of the airline's highest value customers. Accusations of racism were serious, but so were official complaints from a Diamond Medallion member. She felt the cold dread of a no-win situation. The flight was far from over, and the turbulence inside the cabin was now far more dangerous than anything outside. Sarah Jenkins knew she had to de-escalate, and fast. The contained environment of an aircraft cabin could turn a small fire into an inferno in seconds. "Mr. Sterling, please, let's lower our voices," she said, her tone firm but respectful. She turned to Samuel. "Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another seat. We have an empty aisle seat a few rows back." She was offering an outer way to separate the two men and let the situation cool. It was the path of least resistance. Before Samuel could answer, Rick scoffed. "See, even she knows you don't belong here. Go on, take the walk of shame back to where you came from." That was the last straw for Ben Carter. The younger flight attendant, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "Sir, that is completely inappropriate. This passenger has done nothing wrong." "Stay out of this, kid," Rick snapped, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. "Go fetch some more peanuts. The adults are talking." "Bengali now," Sarah ordered under her breath. She couldn't have her crew engaging in a shouting match. She turned back to Rick. "Sir, your behavior is affecting the comfort and safety of other passengers. I must ask you to calm down." "I am calm," he retorted, his voice anything but. "I am a victim here. I'm being harassed, and your solution is to coddle the harasser. I want to speak to the purser. I want to speak to the captain. I'm filing a formal complaint against all of you." Sarah's training kicked in. A passenger demanding to see the captain was a serious escalation. It meant the situation was now beyond her control. "Please remain in your seat, Mr. Sterling. I will inform the flight deck." She walked briskly to the front of the plane, her heart pounding. This was a nightmare. In her 15 years of flying, she had dealt with drunks, medical emergencies, and terrified flyers, but the calculated venomous prejudice of a high-value customer was somehow worse. It corroded everything. She spoke into the intercom, her voice low and steady, explaining the situation to the purser, who then relayed it to the captain. A few minutes later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Ava Rostova emerged. Captain Rostova was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp blue eyes and an air of unshakable authority. She commanded respect, not just because of the 4 stripes on her epaulets, but because of the calm, decisive energy she radiated. She listened intently, as Sarah gave her a quick, whispered briefing. She then walked down the aisle to row 22, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Captain Rostova," she said, her voice even and devoid of emotion. "I understand there's an issue." Seeing the captain, Rick's demeanor shifted. He saw an opportunity to press his advantage. He put on a pained, reasonable expression. "Captain, thank you for coming. I apologize that you had to leave the flight deck. It's just that your crew has been unable to handle a rather simple situation." He launched into a self-serving version of events, painting himself as the aggrieved party, and Samuel as a suspicious and provocative presence. He made sure to emphasize his loyalty and value to Transatlantic Airways. "And frankly, for what I pay, I expect a certain caliber of passenger around me. Your flight attendant's solution was to move me your diamond medallion customer. It's an unacceptable level of service." Captain Rostova listened without interruption, her gaze fixed on Rick. When he was finished, she didn't even glance at Samuel. She kept her eyes locked on Rick. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice dropping a decibel, becoming colder, harder. "Let me be perfectly clear. On this aircraft, there is no diamond, platinum, or gold status. There are only passengers and crew. My first, last, and only priority is the safety of this flight. That includes safety from disruption and harassment." She paused, letting the words sink in. "My flight attendant reported that your behavior has been disruptive. I have now witnessed it myself. Your tone is aggressive, and you have made other passengers uncomfortable. This is your one and only warning. You will cease this behavior immediately. You will not speak to your fellow passenger again unless it is a polite apology. You will not harass my crew. If I have to come out here again before we land in London, you will be met by the authorities at the gate." "Is that understood?" Rick's jaw dropped. He was flabbergasted. He had expected the captain to grovel, to apologize, to offer him a mountain of frequent flyer miles. He was being dressed down like a schoolboy. This is outrageous," he stammered. "I will be reporting you, Captain." "You do that," Captain Rostova said, her voice flat. "But for the next 4 hours you will do it silently. Now I'm returning to my duties." She gave a curt nod, turned and walked back to the cockpit without a single look at Samuel. The cabin was deathly quiet. Rick Sterling, for the first time in a very long time, was speechless. He slumped back in his seat, his face a mask of incandescent fury. He had been publicly and thoroughly shut down. Samuel Pierce, who had remained standing in the aisle throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke, his voice just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Captain Rostova handled that with remarkable professionalism," he said. "Please thank her for me." He then calmly went to the restroom. Sarah stared after him, a new question forming in her mind. Who was this man? He had been racially profiled, insulted to and threatened, yet his primary reaction was to analyze and appreciate the captain's management technique. It was the calmest, most unusual response to victimhood she had ever seen. The mystery of the man in 22B had just deepened. The rest of the flight passed in a thick, suffocating silence. Rick Sterling stewed in his seat, his arms crossed his face, a thundercloud. He refused to make eye contact with anyone. He typed furiously on his phone, no doubt composing a scathing email to TAA's corporate headquarters, a digital declaration of war against Captain Rostova and her entire crew. Samuel, upon returning to his seat, simply reopened his book. He appeared as tranquil as when he first boarded, as if the venomous exchange and the captain's dramatic intervention were nothing more than a passing curiosity. He read for another hour before finally dimming his light and closing his eyes, seemingly at peace. As the plane began its descent into London, the pre-landing rituals began. The crew collected headsets and blankets, their movements crisp and efficient, though a nervous energy still lingered. Sarah made it a point to walk past row 22 several times, keeping a close watch on Rick, but he remained sullen and silent. The moment the wheels of the Airbus A350 kissed the runway at Heathrow, a palpable sense of relief swept through the cabin crew. The ordeal was over. Or so they thought. As they taxied to the gate at Terminal 3, the familiar announcement came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London Heathrow. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate, and the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign." Then Captain Rostover's voice came on, but with an unusual addendum. "Additionally, we ask that all passengers remain seated after the seatbelt sign has been turned off. We have a special request from ground control. We will be deplaning by rows and we ask for your patience. Thank you for flying with Transatlantic Airways." This was not standard procedure. A low murmur rippled through the cabin. Sarah and Ben exchanged a look. This had to be because of Rick Sterling. The captain must have called ahead. Rick, however, interpreted it differently. A slow, smug smile spread across his face. He believed the authorities were there for him to take his statement, to document his horrific experience, to begin the process that would lead to his compensation and the crew's reprimand. He was being treated with the seriousness he deserved. The plane docked, the engines spooled down, and the seatbelt sign pinged off. As instructed, everyone remained seated. The jet bridge connected with a soft thud. The aircraft door was opened, not by a gate agent, but by two uniformed Metropolitan Police officers and a stern-looking man in a sharp suit holding a TAA-branded tablet. Rick's smile widened. He began to gather his things, ready to be escorted off like a VIP witness. The man in the suit, the TAA station manager for Heathrow, stepped inside. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Finch, the station manager here. We apologize for the delay in deplaning. We just need to speak with a few individuals first. Could Sarah Jenkins and Captain Ava Rostover please come to the forward galley?" Sarah's stomach dropped. This was it. The complaint had been processed in record time. She and the captain were about to be read the riot act right here on the jet bridge. She made her way to the front, where Captain Rostover was already emerging from the cockpit, her expression as stoic as ever. "And," Mr. Finch continued, consulting his tablet, "we need to ask the passenger in seat 22A, a Mr. Richard Sterling, to remain on board. We will speak with you shortly." Rick nodded, a look of vindication on his face. He leaned back, ready for his moment. Then came the anomaly. David Finch's eyes scanned the cabin, and his entire demeanor changed. His professional stiffness melted away, replaced by an expression of profound deference. He walked past the police officers, past the galley, and into the premium economy cabin, stopping right at row 22. He didn't look at Rick. His entire focus was on the man in 22B. "Mr. Pierce." David Finch said, his voice laced with a level of respect that bordered on reverence. "Welcome to London. We apologize for the slight delay. We have the car waiting for you on the tarmac whenever you're ready. Your team is waiting in the Windsor suite." Samuel Pierce slowly closed his book and stood up. He smiled warmly at the station manager. "David, good to see you again. No need to apologize. Your crew handled a difficult situation with grace, especially Captain Rostover." He turned and nodded to the captain, who was watching this exchange with wide-eyed disbelief. Sarah and Ben stood frozen in the galley, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. Samuel picked up his simple canvas duffel bag. "Shall we?" he said to David. As he walked past Rick Sterling, he paused for a brief moment. He looked down at the man who had tormented him for 7 hours. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes was enough, not one of triumph or anger, but of a deep, sorrowful pity. Then he was gone, escorted off the plane by the station manager, bypassing the police, bypassing the terminal, and heading towards a private exit. Rick Sterling sat bolt upright, his face pale, the smugness instantly evaporated and replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. He watched as the man he had called a fake traveler was treated with a level of importance he had never seen afforded to anyone, not even royalty. The police officers and the now stern-faced Mr. Finch turned their attention to him. "Mr. Sterling," Finch said, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "Now we need to have a word about your conduct on this flight." The truth was beginning to crash down on Rick Sterling, and he suddenly felt very, very small. The real reason for the delay, the police and the station manager, was now terrifyingly clear. It wasn't for him. It was because of him. The next 24 hours were a blur of anxiety for Sarah Jenkins and Captain Ava Rostova. After giving their statements to the police and the station manager regarding Rick Sterling's disruptive behavior, a report that David Finch now seemed extremely keen to document in excruciating detail, they were told to report to the Transatlantic Airways European headquarters near Heathrow the following afternoon. The summons was ominous. "A debriefing regarding Flight 101, the email read. It was sent from the office of the Executive Vice President of European Operations. This was not a standard procedure. This was a high-level review. "This is because of Sterling," Sarah said to Ava, as they shared a coffee in the crew lounge before the meeting. "His complaint must have gone straight to the top. He's probably claiming discrimination, mistreatment by the captain. Anything to save his own skin." Eva Rostova stirred her espresso, her face grim. "Let him. My report is factual and details his verbal abuse and harassment of both a passenger and the crew. The safety of the flight was my only concern. If they have a problem with that, then this isn't the airline I thought it was." Despite her brave words, a knot of apprehension was tightening in her stomach. A black mark from corporate could ground a captain's career. They arrived at the gleaming glass and steel TAA building and were escorted to the executive floor. The air here was different, hushed, rarefied, smelling of expensive leather and corporate power. They were led to the main boardroom, a vast space dominated by a polished mahogany table that could seat 30. At the head of the table, looking out the panoramic window at the planes taking off and landing at Heathrow, stood a man. As he turned around, Sarah Jenkins felt the air leave her lungs. It was him. The man from 22B, Samuel Pierce. He was no longer in the simple sweater and trousers. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt and no tie. He looked powerful at ease and utterly in command of the space. Standing beside him were two other people they recognized from the company's internal newsletters: Maria Flores, the formidable chief operating officer, and James Albright, the EVP of European Operations. Sarah and Ava stopped dead in the doorway, their minds racing, trying to connect the quiet, book-reading passenger with the man holding court in the nerve center of the airline. Samuel Pierce smiled the same calm, gentle smile he'd had on the plane. "Captain Rostova, Ms. Jenkins, please come in. Have a seat." They walked forward, woodenly, and sat down, their professional composure shattered. James Albright cleared his throat, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Captain Ms. Jenkins," Albright began formally. "We called you here today to discuss the incident on Flight 101. But first, I believe introductions are in order. This is Samuel Pierce." He paused as if for dramatic effect. "As of last week, Mr. Pierce's investment firm, an entity called Orion Holdings, completed a majority acquisition of Transatlantic Airways. As of yesterday morning, the board has officially ratified his appointment. Mr. Pierce is the new chairman of the board for TAA. The silence in the room was absolute. Sarah felt a dizzying wave of vertigo. The man Rick Sterling had mocked as a fake traveler, the man she had almost moved to a different seat to appease an obnoxious bully, was their new boss. The ultimate boss. He hadn't just bought a ticket. He had bought the entire airline. Captain Rostova, a woman rarely surprised by anything, simply stared at Samuel, her mind replaying every moment of the flight. Her decision to confront Sterling, her firm words, her defense of the cabin's safety, she had done it all in front of the man who now owned her career. Samuel let the weight of the revelation settle for a moment before he spoke. His voice was the same soothing baritone, but now it carried the unmistakable resonance of authority. "I want to start," he said, looking directly at the two women, "by apologizing." This was the last thing they expected. "I apologize," he continued, "for putting you in an impossible position. My intention in flying that route in premium economy was not to create a scene. It was to experience our airline from the perspective of our customers and our crew without the filter of an executive tour. I wanted to see the real TAA, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Unfortunately, I got a heavy dose of the ugly." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "But I also got to see the good. I saw a junior flight attendant, Ben Carter, try to stand up for what was right. I saw a lead flight attendant, Miss Jenkins, navigate an incredibly toxic situation with professionalism, trying to de-escalate even while being verbally abused. And I saw a captain take absolute command of her aircraft, prioritizing safety and order above the inflated ego of a so-called high-value customer. What you both did last night. That was the real TAA. That is the airline I want to lead." Sarah and Ava exchanged a stunned glance. This wasn't a reprimand. It was a commendation. "I didn't call you here to punish you," Samuel said. "I called you here because I need your help. You are on the front lines. You see the problems before anyone in this building does. The incident with Mr. Sterling wasn't just about one racist passenger. It was a symptom of a corporate culture that I suspect has begun to value a customer's wallet more than their character. It's a culture that makes a flight attendant hesitate before correcting a diamond medallion. Members' abhorrent behavior. That needs to change, and it starts today." He looked from Sarah to Ava, his eyes filled not with the judgment of a boss, but with the curiosity of a student. "So tell me," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Forget I'm the chairman. Tell me what it's really like out there. Tell me what needs to be fixed. Don't hold back." In that moment, in the hushed quiet of the TAA boardroom, Sarah Jenkins and Ava Rostova realized this was more than just a debrief. It was the beginning of a revolution. For the next 2 hours, the TAA boardroom was transformed from a chamber of corporate judgment into a crucible of honest, unfiltered feedback. Initially hesitant, Sarah and Ava soon found their voices spurred on by Samuel Pierce's genuine curiosity. He wasn't a suit asking pro forma questions. He was an engineer trying to understand a complex system that was failing. He waved away the protests of the other executives when the conversation veered into sensitive territory. No, let her speak. He would insist, making notes in a simple, unadorned leather notebook, the same kind he might have kept his book in. Eva Rostova spoke about the immense pressure on pilots, the outdated scheduling software that led to crew fatigue, and the maintenance reports that were increasingly being pushed to their absolute deadlines to save costs. "We're a safe airline," she stated, her voice unwavering. "But we're stretching the rubber band thinner every year. We need investment in infrastructure, not just in fancy new seat cushions for first class." Samuel nodded, scribbling furiously. "Details, Captain. Give me specific examples of the software issues. Tell me about the maintenance bottlenecks at JFK versus Heathrow. Then it was Sarah's turn. She spoke of the flight attendant experience, the shrinking layover times, the inadequate support for dealing with unruly passengers, and the very culture of appeasement that had put her in such a difficult position with Rick Sterling. We have a "customer is always right" policy. Sarah explained, her confidence growing, but the system translates that into "the richest customer is always right." We have codes we can enter into a passenger's file notes about their preferences, but there's no effective system for flagging passengers who are consistently abusive to the crew. So a guy like Sterling can be a nightmare on a dozen flights. But as long as his company keeps buying expensive tickets, his slate is wiped clean for the next crew. We are told to absorb the abuse smile and offer a glass of champagne. It's demoralizing. Samuel stopped writing and looked up, his eyes hard. So we reward bad behavior and exhaust our best people. That's a losing business model. He turned to Maria Flores, the COO. Maria, I want a full review of the passenger flagging and conduct policy. I want a proposal on my desk in 1 week for a zero-tolerance policy. It should be clear, enforceable, and protect our crew first. A passenger's value to this airline will be measured by the respect they show our people, not just by the money they spend. Maria Flores, a woman known for her tough, no-nonsense attitude, simply nodded. I'm on it. Samuel then looked back at Sarah. What about training? How do we prepare new attendants like Ben Carter to handle a situation like that? Honestly, sir, the training is mostly about safety procedures and service standards, Sarah admitted. The de-escalation training is a short module, mostly online. It doesn't prepare you for the psychological reality of being verbally assaulted at 37,000 feet by someone who believes their frequent flyer card makes them your superior. That changes now, Samuel declared. We're designing a new training program. The ambassador programs, let's call it. Every crew member is an ambassador for this airline, and we will empower them as such. I want you, Miss Jenkins, to help lead its development. Your experience is more valuable than any consultant's report. Sarah was speechless. A promotion, a leadership role in shaping company policy. It was beyond anything she could have imagined. He continued, laying out a vision that left the old guard executives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. He talked about profit sharing for all employees, from baggage handlers to pilots. He discussed investing in new technologies to improve efficiency and reduce crew burnout. He talked about creating a culture of ownership and pride. People like Richard Sterling thrive in systems where rules are flexible for the wealthy and rigid for everyone else. Samuel explained, his voice resonating with passion. They exploit ambiguity and a culture of fear. We will remove the ambiguity. We will build a culture of respect. We will make it clear that our planes are our employees' workplace, and they are entitled to the same dignity and safety as someone in an office. That dignity is not for sale, not for any price. By the time the meeting concluded, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The fear was gone, replaced by a crackling energy of possibility. As they stood to leave, Samuel shook hands with both women. Captain Rostova, your decisive action saved that flight from becoming a far more dangerous situation. Don't ever hesitate to make that call, he said. And Ms. Jenkins, I look forward to working with you on the new training program. Your voice is exactly what this company needs to hear. As they walked out of the boardroom and back into the normal world, Ava turned to Sarah. In 25 years of flying, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, that was the most terrifying and then the most exhilarating meeting of my life. Sarah nodded, a sense of purpose settling over her. The storm of Flight 101 was over, but the work of its architect was just beginning. Samuel Pierce wasn't just a chairman. He was a builder, and they were all about to see what a new kind of airline looked like. While Samuel Pierce was planning the future of transatlantic airways, Rick Sterling was plotting his revenge. He spent the day after his arrival in London firing off emails from his suite at the Savoy, each one more vitriolic than the last. He wrote to TAA's customer service, its corporate legal department, and to every executive on the leadership page he could find. His narrative was a masterwork of self-pity and fabricated indignation. He described the unhinged and aggressive passenger in 22B, the insolent and unhelpful flight attendants, and the rogue and unprofessional captain who had threatened him. He demanded no less than 1 million frequent flyer miles, in compensation a full cash refund for his flight, a written apology from the CEO, and the immediate termination of Captain Rostova and her entire crew. He finished by threatening a lawsuit and a smear campaign in the financial press. He felt powerful, righteous, and confident that the airline would fold like a cheap suit. The next morning, he strode into the London office of his private equity firm, Sterling Knight, feeling triumphant. He recounted a sanitized, heroic version of the story to his colleagues, painting himself as a champion of customer rights, standing up to a failing airline. Around 11 a.m., his assistant buzzed him. "Mr. Sterling, a Mr. Albright from Transatlantic Airways is on the line for you. He says it's urgent." Rick's lips curled into a smug smile. Here it comes, he thought. The groveling. He picked up the phone. "Rick Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, this is James Albright, EVP of European Operations for TAA," the voice on the other end said. It was cold and clinical. "I'm calling in response to the 17 emails you sent to our offices regarding your experience on Flight 101. "Good," Rick said curtly. "I expect you have a compensation package ready for my review." There was a dry, humorless chuckle on the other end. "Oh, we have a package for you, Mr. Sterling, but I don't think you're going to like it. First, let's be clear. We have detailed statements from the entire cabin crew, the captain, and no fewer than 4 other passengers in your vicinity. They all corroborate that you were the sole aggressor in the incident." Rick's bravado faltered. "That's a lie. They're circling the wagons to protect themselves. Second, Albright continued ignoring him. As a result of your verbal abuse of our staff and the harassment of another passenger, which constituted a clear violation of our conditions of carriage, Transatlantic Airways has made a decision. Effective immediately, your Diamond Medallion status is revoked, your account is closed, and your entire mileage balance, all 2.8 million miles, has been forfeited." Rick felt a hot flush of rage and disbelief. "You can't do that." "We can and we have," Albright said flatly. "Furthermore, you are hereby banned from flying on Transatlantic Airways or any of our partner airlines for life. If you attempt to book a ticket, it will be cancelled. If you show up at one of our gates, you will be denied boarding." Rick was sputtering, unable to form a coherent sentence. His status, his miles, his entire travel identity gone. But Albright wasn't finished. The hammer was about to fall. "And finally, Mr. Sterling, there's the matter of your employer. Sterling Knight holds a significant corporate travel account with TAA valued at over $5 million annually. Our new chairman of the board, Mr. Samuel Pierce, reviewed the details of that account this morning. He also had the opportunity to review the details of your conduct on Flight 101. A cold, icy dread washed over Rick. Pierce. The man from 22B. It couldn't be. The fake traveller. The chairman. The world tilted on its axis. Our chairman. Albright said, his voice dripping with ice, was the man you spent 7 hours harassing in seat 22B. He felt that your behavior was not representative of the values Sterling Knight claims to uphold in its corporate responsibility statements. As such, he has instructed our legal team to activate the ethics and conduct clause in your company's contract. We are terminating the agreement effective immediately. The phone felt slick in Rick's sweaty palm. This wasn't just about his travel perks anymore. This was a multi-million-dollar catastrophe he had single-handedly caused. Before he could even process the magnitude of his blunder, the door to his office burst open. It was Marcus Knight, the firm's senior partner, his face ashen. He held his phone in his hand, his expression one of pure fury. "Rick!" Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I just got off the phone with the CEO of Transatlantic Airways. What in God's name did you do?" Rick Sterling's house of cards, built on a foundation of arrogance and prejudice, had just been blown away by a hurricane of his own making. The hard karma he had never believed in had arrived, and it was not there to negotiate. It was there to collect. His career, his reputation, and his sense of superiority were all about to be repossessed. He was fired before lunch. The 6 months that followed the incident on Flight 101 were not just a period of change for Transatlantic Airways. They were a complete cultural rebirth. The shockwaves from that single transatlantic crossing radiated through every department, dismantling old hierarchies and forging a new corporate identity in the crucible of one man's vision. For Rick Sterling, the descent was brutally swift. His final moments at Sterling Knight were a humiliating tableau of his own making. Marcus Knight, a man he had once considered a peer, stood in his office doorway, not as a colleague, but as an executioner. "Pack your desk, Rick," Marcus had said, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "Security will be here in 5 minutes to escort you out." "Marcus, you can't be serious," Rick pleaded, his mind reeling. It was a misunderstanding, a difficult passenger, an overzealous crew. "I can fix this. I'll call this Pierce fellow, I'll apologize, I'll smooth it over." Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think an apology can claw back a $5 million contract, or erase the fact that you, a senior vice president of this firm, acted like a belligerent thug and racially harassed the new chairman of the airline? The damage isn't just financial. Rick, it's reputational. Our clients trust our judgment. How can they trust us when one of our top men displays such a catastrophic lack of it?" He gestured around the opulent office. "This is over. The board is unanimous. You're a liability we can no longer afford." Rick was left speechless, watching as his career, built over 2 decades of aggressive ambition, evaporated in less than 2 hours. His name became poison in the world of high finance. The story, in its delicious karmic detail, had spread like wildfire through the tight-knit circles of London and New York. No firm would touch him. He was a walking, talking case study in what not to do. The last anyone heard, he was forced to sell his lavish apartment and was piecing together a living with freelance consulting gigs for minor firms, the kind of work he would have sneered at a year prior. His new reality was a cramped middle seat on a budget airline, flying from London Stansted to Frankfurt. As he sat with his knees pressed against the seat in front of him, the garish yellow and blue of the cabin an assault on his senses, he looked out the small, smudged window. On the tarmac, a gleaming Transatlantic Airways Airbus A350 taxied past, its deep blue and silver livery, looking more regal than ever. He saw the flight attendants in their smart uniforms greeting passengers with genuine smiles. For a moment, he felt a pang of something so profound it almost choked him, a longing not just for the lost luxury, but for the respect and status he had squandered so carelessly. He was no longer a traveler. He was just cargo. Meanwhile, the airline he had tried to humiliate was thriving under its new philosophy. The Ambassador Program, with Sarah Jenkins at its helm as the new Director of In-Flight Experience and Training, became the gold standard for the industry. Today, she was observing a simulation. A young, bright-eyed flight attendant named Chloe was role-playing with an instructor, playing the part of an arrogant, high-status passenger. "My briefcase won't fit because this person's bag is taking up all the room." The instructor playing, the passenger bellowed, gesturing to a soft duffel bag. "I am a Platinum Elite member. Make them move it." Chloe didn't flinch. Her training kicked in. "Sir, I can see you're frustrated, and I'm happy to help find a solution," she said, her voice calm and firm. "The overhead bins are shared space, and both bags fit within our policy. I can help you find another space for your briefcase, or perhaps I can gate check it for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But I will not be asking another passenger to move their personal belongings." Her tone was polite, helpful, but utterly non-negotiable. The instructor dropped character and smiled. "Perfect, Chloe. You held your ground, offered solutions, but didn't compromise the policy or the other passenger's dignity. That's the TAA way." Sarah felt a swell of pride. This was the change. It was real, and she had helped build it. The new culture was visible everywhere. Gate agents felt empowered to deny boarding to intoxicated passengers, regardless of their ticket class. Mechanics who flagged potential maintenance issues were celebrated, not pressured to sign off quickly. The entire company was breathing easier, standing taller. Samuel Pierce remained the architect of this new world, and his methods were as unconventional as ever. He had indeed issued the corporate jet. One Tuesday afternoon at Chicago, O'Hare, during a delay, he was seen not in a VIP lounge, but on the tarmac, talking to a team of baggage handlers, asking them about their new scanning equipment and what other tools would make their physically demanding job easier. He listened, took notes, and a month later the team had the state-of-the-art ergonomic lifts they had mentioned. He wasn't a distant chairman in an ivory tower. He was in the trenches, proving that every role mattered. That evening, as Sarah was packing up at the training facility near Heathrow, Samuel stopped by his ever-present leather notebook in hand. He was on his way to catch a red-eye to Singapore. "How did the simulations go today, Sarah?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Brilliantly, Mr. Pierce." She beamed. Chloe, one of our new hires, handled the Sterling scenario flawlessly. She was professional, respectful, but completely immovable on policy. He wouldn't have stood a chance against her. Samuel smiled, a deep, genuine expression of satisfaction. "That's the resilience I was hoping we could build. It's not about winning a fight. It's about making it clear that a fight is not an option, that our cabins are places of safety and respect." He looked out the large window at a TAA jet gracefully lifting off into the night sky. "You know, when I first bought the controlling stake, the analysts said I was crazy. They said my people-first approach was naive and would kill profits. But our customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, staff turnover is the lowest in the industry, and we're projecting our most profitable quarter in a decade." He turned back to Sarah, his expression thoughtful. "That flight, it started as a diagnostic test for a business I'd just acquired. I wanted to find the cracks in the system. I never expected to find the foundation for a whole new one. You, Captain Rostova Ben Carter, you showed me the character that was buried under years of bad policy. All I did was give it a chance to breathe." Sarah Jenkins watched him leave a quiet, unassuming man who commanded more loyalty and respect than 1,000 shouting executives. She looked around the training center at the proud posters on the wall, showcasing the company's diverse employees under the heading, "Respect has a destination." The airline's soul hadn't just been found. It had been put in the pilot's seat, charting a new course towards a brighter horizon. The story of Flight 101 is a powerful reminder that the true measure of a person isn't found in their title or their bank account, but in how they treat others when they think no one important is watching. Rick Sterling believed his status made him invincible, but he learned the hard way that character is the one thing you can't buy, and a lack of it can cost you everything. Samuel Pierce, the quiet man with the book, proved that true leadership isn't about shouting the loudest, but about listening the hardest, and having the courage to rebuild a broken system from the ground up. This event didn't just change an airline. It sent a message that echoes in every airport terminal and every aircraft cabin. Dignity is non-negotiable. What did you think of the swift and decisive karma that found Rick Sterling? Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's arrogance led to their immediate downfall? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice at 37,000 feet resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life stories. Thank you for listening.